Sit back and enjoy 2 hours of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started. Cats love to eat human earwax because the proteins it contains are appealing to them. In fact, most animals clean the ears of other members of their group. The Fermi paradox arose as part of a casual conversation in the 1950s when Enrico Fermi asked, "Where is everybody?" referring to extraterrestrial life. The Fermi paradox is the discrepancy between the lack of conclusive evidence of advanced extraterrestrial life and the apparent probability of its existence. Guayule is an alternative to the rubber tree that contains between 3 and 7% rubber. It can be grown in hot desert climates and requires a fraction of the water and fertilizer needed by rubber trees while also being resistant to weeds, insects, and diseases. It was used by the United States during World War II. The Pacific beetle cockroach produces a milk-like substance rich in high-density protein crystals packed with essential amino acids, sugars, and healthy fats. Its use as a protein supplement has been suggested, although extracting it is extremely difficult, and it is not currently a viable food source. In the past, the Olympic Games received sponsorship and support from tobacco companies. For much of the 20th century, smoking was far more normalized, and cigarette companies took advantage of major sporting events to promote their brands. At some Olympic Games, officially licensed cigarettes were sold, and tobacco companies participated in campaigns related to the event. This relationship gradually changed as evidence of the harmful effects of tobacco increased. In 1988, the International Olympic Committee adopted a policy to make the Games a tobacco-free event and restrict tobacco advertising and sponsorship. There are ice volcanoes, formerly known as cryovolcanoes, which erupt water, gases, and hydrocarbons. Instead of expelling molten rock like volcanoes on Earth, they can release water, ammonia, methane, and other volatile substances that remain frozen at the low temperatures of the outer solar system. Evidence of cryovolcanism has been found on worlds such as Pluto, Ceres, and Neptune's moon Triton. Related phenomena are also studied on icy moons, such as Enceladus, whose enormous geysers eject water vapor and ice particles into space from fractures near its south pole. Neobuthus factorio, a species of scorpion in the family Buthidae, was named by one of the researchers after the video game Factorio, which was created by the researcher's son. The smallest flower in the world is the rootless duckweed. The plant measures approximately 1/42nd of an inch long by 1/85th of an inch wide and weighs almost as much as 2 grains of salt. It grows on the surface of freshwater lakes or marshes. It belongs to the genus Wolfia, which consists of tiny floating plants that lack roots and can look like simple green specks on the water. Some species produce flowers so small that they can barely be distinguished with the naked eye. Each plant can be less than 1 millimeter long and can reproduce rapidly by producing new buds, forming extensive green mats over calm water. Frank sign is a crease that can form on the earlobe and may be a sign of poor cardiovascular health. It is a diagonal groove that runs across the earlobe and is named after American physician Sanders T. Frank, who described its possible connection to coronary disease in 1973. Since then, various studies have found an association between this feature and a higher cardiovascular risk, although it also becomes more common with age. Almost all cryogenically preserved bodies were thawed and disposed of after the first cryonics facilities went bankrupt. This occurred mainly during the early decades of cryonics, when several small organizations lacked sufficient funds to maintain preservation indefinitely. One of the best-known cases involved a facility in California where several patients stored during the 1960s and 1970s eventually thawed after the resources needed to maintain them ran out. The industry later adopted stricter financial systems, such as funds specifically designated for the long-term maintenance of each patient. There is a fruit that tastes exactly like chocolate pudding. It is a fruit native to Central and South America called black sapote, which tastes like chocolate and sweet custard. Its scientific name is Diospyros nigra, and it belongs to the same genus as persimmons. When ripe, its flesh changes from a greenish color to a very dark brown and develops a soft, creamy texture, which is why it is often compared to chocolate pudding. It can be eaten on its own or used in smoothies, desserts, ice cream, and other sweets, although its natural flavor is milder and fruitier than that of real chocolate. South Africa's current flag is only 32 years old and was designed just a few weeks before it was officially raised on April 27, 1994. Its design was created by Frederick Brownell, then South Africa's state herald, and it was initially adopted as a provisional flag. It debuted during the country's first national elections with universal suffrage, held from April 26th through April 29th. Although it was originally intended to be used for 5 years, it was so widely accepted that it eventually became permanently incorporated into the South African Constitution. The exercise paradox, also known as the workout paradox, refers to the finding that physical activity, although essential for maintaining overall health, does not necessarily lead to significant weight loss or greater calorie expenditure. Some research suggests that the body may compensate for some of the energy used during exercise by reducing energy expenditure in other processes. This phenomenon helps explain why two people with very different activity levels may show smaller differences in calorie expenditure than expected. Even so, exercise provides numerous benefits, such as improving cardiovascular fitness, strengthening muscles and bones, and supporting metabolic health. Every LEGO minifigure had exactly the same head shape during the first 21 years of minifigure production, which limited what the characters could do. It was not until 1999, with the Jar Jar Binks minifigure for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, that LEGO finally introduced sculpted headpieces for its minifigures. The United States Geological Survey, or USGS, uses the term gauge instead of gauge with a U because an employee in 1892 argued that gauge was the proper Saxon spelling rather than the Norman term Gauge. When Ford launched the Model T in 1908, its runabout version sold for about $825, equivalent to nearly $30,000 today. Despite its popularity, around 15 million units would eventually be produced. Ford continued lowering the price as manufacturing efficiency improved, and by 1925, the basic model cost only $260, equivalent to about $4,800 today. During mating, the female of certain biting midges in the Ceratopogonidae family pierces the male's head with her mouth parts and releases substances that break down his tissues, which she then feeds on. Afterward, part of the male's reproductive organ may remain attached to the female, forming a barrier that makes future mating more difficult. If Antarctica were a country, it would be the second largest country, with a land mass of 5.5 million square miles. Only Russia, with more than 6.6 million square miles, would have a larger area, while Canada would rank third. Approximately 98% of the continent is covered in ice, with the ice sheet averaging nearly 1.2 miles thick. In addition, Antarctica contains around 90% of the planet's ice and nearly 70% of all its fresh water, stored mainly in its enormous ice sheet. Both the Catholic and Protestant Bibles contain 27 books in the New Testament. However, the Protestant Bible has 39 books in the Old Testament, while the Catholic Bible has 46. The 7 additional books in the Catholic Bible are Tobit, Judith, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Wisdom, Sirach, and Baruch. Dumbo octopuses are named after the famous Disney elephant. They live at least 13,100 feet below the surface. Dumbo octopuses move by slowly flapping their ear-like fins and use their arms to maneuver. Samuel Houston, the first and third president of the Republic of Texas, governor of Tennessee and Texas, and the person for whom the city of Houston was named, was descended from the Barons of Houston in Scotland and was also a member of the Cherokee tribe. The number of active-duty 4-star generals, which is the highest officer rank in the United States Army, is limited. It is set at 7 Army generals, 2 Marine Corps generals, 8 Air Force generals, 2 Space Force generals, 6 Navy admirals, and 2 Coast Guard admirals. The 300 Club at the South Pole includes a tradition of going from a sauna at over 200 degrees Fahrenheit to the outdoors at -100 degrees Fahrenheit, often running a lap around the South Pole marker wearing only boots. Ice skating in England dates back to at least the 12th century, when people used bone skates to travel across marshes in winter. These early skates were made mainly from long animal bones, which were smoothed and fastened to the feet with straps. Because bone did not provide the same grip as a metal blade, skaters usually propelled themselves with pointed poles. Over time, skates with iron blades appeared, allowing people to push directly against the ice and helping transform this practical means of winter transportation into a recreational activity and, centuries later, an organized sport. Since the late 1950s, aerospace engineers have used the term unobtainium to refer to unusual or expensive materials, or to theoretically describe a material that would be perfect for their needs in every respect, except for the fact that it does not exist. The famous crash landing scene involving the B-17 in Tora 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 was not old archival footage. The aircraft used during filming suffered an actual landing gear failure, and the emergency landing was captured by the film crew. Since no one was injured, they decided to use the footage in the movie. There is a series of 24-hour endurance races called the 24 Hours of Lemons, held in the United States, where teams have a budget limit of $500 per car. Four-time World's Strongest Man winner Jon Paul Sigmarsson, who famously declared that there is no reason to be alive if you cannot do a deadlift, died at the age of 32 while deadlifting at the gym. The Las Vegas Strip is not located within the city limits of Las Vegas, but instead lies in unincorporated Clark County. Most of its famous hotels, casinos, and resorts are located in the unincorporated communities of Paradise and Winchester. The Strip stretches for approximately 4 miles along Las Vegas Boulevard and is home to some of the most recognizable establishments in the region. This administrative peculiarity means that places associated worldwide with Las Vegas, such as the Bellagio, the MGM Grand, and Caesar's Palace, are technically not inside the city. The city of Las Vegas itself begins farther north, where the historic downtown area and Fremont Street are located. Wisconsin produces more than half of all the cranberries in the world. 5% are sold fresh, and most are used for sauces, juices, dried fruit, and so on. In fact, settlers called the fruit cranberry because the flowers resembled the head of a sandhill crane. It takes about 4,400 cranberries to make 1 gallon of juice. The most prolific man-eating lions were a pride of 15 in the Njombe region of Tanzania, which claimed up to 15 lives between 1932 and 1947. Unlike most lions, the Njombe pride carried out its attacks in the afternoon and used the nighttime hours to travel 15 to 20 miles toward an unsuspecting village. There is a type of Japanese aquatic beetle that, when eaten by a frog, can swim through the frog's digestive tract and escape through its anus. It is the beetle Regimbartia attenuata, which is capable of surviving after being swallowed and actively moving through its predator's digestive system. In experiments, most of the beetles that were swallowed managed to emerge alive, some within a matter of minutes. Researchers also found that the beetle needs to retain movement in its legs to accomplish this, indicating that it is not simply expelled passively, but actively participates in its own escape. Sirtaki, the folk dance commonly associated with Greece, was originally choreographed for a movie in 1964. The 3 most recent Democratic presidents of the United States to die were Jimmy Carter, who served from 1977 to 1981 and died in 2024 at the age of 100, Lyndon B. Johnson, who assumed the presidency after the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963 and died in 1973, and Harry S. Truman, who assumed the presidency after the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1945 and died in 1972. Scientists rediscovered DNA from the extinct dwarf elephant in Sicily. 2 different species of dwarf elephants evolved separately on the same island. The smaller one stood about 3 feet 3 inches tall and weighed around 660 pounds, while the other stood about 6 feet 7 inches tall and weighed around 2,200 pounds. Scientists were amazed when they found a 17-year-old chicken egg in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire, with the yolk and egg white still inside. It is believed to be the only one of its kind. The egg was discovered during an archaeological excavation in an ancient Roman-era pit and is actually around 1,700 years old. Its preservation is exceptional because it still contains liquid inside, something extremely rare in archaeological eggs. It was found alongside other eggs that broke during the excavation and released a strong odor, while this specimen managed to remain intact. The least densely populated county in the United States east of the Mississippi River is Hamilton County in New York, with around 3 people per square mile. It is located in the heart of the Adirondack Mountains, and much of its territory is covered by forests, lakes, and protected areas. With a land area of more than 1,700 square miles, it has only about 5,000 permanent residents. It is also the least populated county in the state of New York and has no incorporated cities. During certain seasons, however, Its population increases considerably because of tourism and the many vacation homes in the region. The first use of commercial refrigeration was in Australia to keep beer cold. In 1854, Scottish inventor James Harrison built one of the first mechanical refrigeration machines used commercially in Geelong. His system used vapor compression and soon found applications in breweries, where it allowed beer to be cooled in a more controlled way. Harrison continued improving the technology and later developed large systems for preserving meat. His work made Australia one of the pioneering places in the practical application of mechanical refrigeration to the food and beverage industry. The Old Testament was not originally written using the same Hebrew alphabet that is used today. The oldest Hebrew texts were written using forms of writing related to the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, which was used by the ancient Israelites during the first millennium before Christ. After the Babylonian exile, a script of Aramaic origin began to spread, from which the square Hebrew alphabet used today evolved. Some of the Dead Sea Scrolls even show an interesting combination: texts written mainly in later Hebrew characters that occasionally reserve Paleo-Hebrew script for certain divine names. In 2013, Vulture magazine ranked Mazzy Star's song "Fade Into You" as the most overused song in movies and television. Slingshot spiders use a web stretched like a spring to launch themselves along with their web toward prey, with an acceleration 100 times greater than that of a cheetah, making them some of the fastest-moving arachnids known. These small spiders, belonging to the genus Theridiosoma, keep their web under tension by holding a central line until they detect a nearby insect. They then release the tension, and the entire web shoots forward. The movement can reach accelerations greater than 1,000 meters per second squared and occurs in just a few milliseconds, trapping the prey before it has time to escape. In some regions, eating hippopotamus meat can be dangerous because of the animal's susceptibility to anthrax, which can be transmitted to humans. Hippos can be affected by outbreaks caused by the bacterium Bacillus anthracis, especially in certain parts of Africa, where large numbers of animals have sometimes died. People can be exposed by handling, preparing, or consuming contaminated meat from infected animals. For this reason, during some outbreaks, health and conservation authorities have warned local communities to avoid touching or consuming animals found dead. Anthrax can also affect other wild and domestic mammals. There is archaeological evidence that Vikings reached Baghdad, the center of the Islamic Empire. Scandinavian traders, especially those known as Varangians, traveled along the major rivers of Eastern Europe to the Black Sea and Caspian Sea, connecting with the trade routes of the Islamic world. Huge quantities of Islamic silver coins, known as dirhams, have been found at Viking sites, some of them minted in Baghdad. In addition, Arab writers such as Ahmed ibn Fadlan left descriptions of Norse traders encountered during their travels in the 10th century. These routes allowed silver, furs, and other goods to be exchanged across thousands of miles. Shortly before his death, artist Keith Haring established a charitable foundation that now owns all of his copyrights. Money from licensing his work goes to disadvantaged children and charities related to AIDS. Diamond Dallas Page sued Jay-Z over the use of the diamond-shaped hand gesture, which had been trademarked by the wrestler, and won the lawsuit. Even mild dehydration can reduce your concentration, memory, and mood. Water plays a role in numerous essential processes in the body, from regulating temperature to transporting nutrients. The sensation of thirst does not always appear immediately when the body begins losing fluids, especially during exercise or in hot environments. Water needs vary depending on physical activity, climate, diet, and the individual. In addition, a considerable portion of daily hydration can come from water-rich foods such as fruits, vegetables, soups, and other foods. Miracle Grow soluble fertilizer was developed after Horace Hagedorn met gardener Otto Stern and learned about the difficulties he had transporting plants in 1944. They later hired O. Wesley Davidson, a professor at Rutgers University, to formulate the product. Newborn babies can contract herpes through contact with someone who has a cold sore, and this can be fatal in some cases. There is a supercar vending machine in Singapore that dispenses Ferraris and Lamborghinis. In London, Big Ben has a permanent microphone next to the bell to broadcast the chimes live at the beginning of news programs in the United Kingdom. Because of the speed of sound, if a person listens to analog radio at the base of the tower, they will hear the chimes on the radio before hearing them in real life. The Ada programming language was designed in 1977 to replace 450 programming languages used by the United States Department of Defense at the time. Many countries do not grant full freedom of panorama, meaning that photographs of publicly visible buildings can infringe copyright and cannot be shared, especially for commercial purposes, without authorization. Diane Fossey, the conservationist who lived with gorillas for several years, was murdered while conducting research in Rwanda, most likely because of her lifelong crusade against poaching. In 1842, Charles Dickens visited the White House. When he arrived, he knocked on the front door, and when no one answered, he simply walked in on his own. Reindeer eyes turn blue during winter to help them see in low light conditions, while in summer they are golden. No other mammal is known to have this ability. The change occurs in the tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer located behind the retina. During the dark Arctic winters, this structure becomes bluish and scatters more light inside the eye, increasing visual sensitivity. In summer, it returns to its golden appearance and reflects light differently. This adaptation is especially useful in regions where reindeer go from months of nearly constant daylight to long periods of twilight and darkness. During the age of sailing ships, if a group became stranded without food during an extreme emergency, there was a practice known as the custom of the sea, in which one member of the group was chosen by lot to be sacrificed so that the others could survive. This practice largely ceased to be considered acceptable after an important court ruling in 1884. Monasteries used to distill a compound called uskaba, meaning water of life in Gaelic. When it became popular, people began calling it simply uska, which eventually evolved into its modern form, whiskey. This is the skeleton of a direwolf, which can sometimes be easily identified compared with other Canis specimens because of the direwolf's baculum, or penis bone, since it is very different from that of all other living canids. In 1984, the band Motorhead played so loudly that the ceiling of the venue began to crack and shed plaster, forcing the concert to be canceled. Mike Millard was a legendary underground concert taper, known for making some of the best unofficial recordings of major bands during the 1970s and 1980s. To bring his bulky recording equipment into some venues, he pretended to need a wheelchair and hid the equipment inside it while a friend pushed him. The background check for White House positions asks whether the person has ever been suspected of violating the law. The A26 highway in France is so heavily used by British tourists that it is officially nicknamed Autoroute des Anglais, or Highway of the English. The last public execution by guillotine in France took place in 1939. Actor Christopher Lee was in France at the time and attended as a spectator. Disney's Animal Kingdom was the idea of designer Joe Rohde, who had previously designed the Adventurers Club at Pleasure Island. When presenting the idea for the new animal-themed park, Rohde brought a 400-pound Bengal tiger to the meeting with Disney Chief Executive Officer Michael Eisner. The Pit of Despair was a device used in widely condemned experiments that isolated young monkeys in a dark, smooth tank with sloping sides and a curved bottom. The monkeys remained isolated and without hope in the darkness for months, supposedly to induce and study depression. According to a University of Washington study reported by NPR, poor diets cause more deaths than smoking. The analysis evaluated 195 countries and ranked Japan, France, and Spain among those with the best diets, while the United States ranked 43rd. 800 million people eat too little, while 1,900,000,000 eat too much. Related to that, Halley's Comet was seen in England in 1066, the year of the Norman Conquest, and was interpreted as an omen, with one contemporary observer referring to it as a source of tears for many mothers that foretold the fall of his country. In Switzerland, dashboard camera recordings are generally not allowed in court unless they help solve a serious crime. Privacy laws make their use difficult, and traffic violations are not considered serious enough. Known as the Benign because of his well-meaning nature, Ferdinand I of Austria, son of the last Holy Roman Emperor, had to abdicate after suffering as many as 20 epileptic seizures a day. The movies A Bug's Life, Monsters Incorporated, Finding Nemo, and Wall-E were conceived during a single working lunch. Stephen Lee was one of 3 anti-apartheid activists who escaped from Pretoria prison in 1979. In 1980, the warden in charge that night was tried for helping with the escape, But Lee sent a letter to a South African newspaper proclaiming the warden's innocence, and the warden was ultimately acquitted. Despite being slightly smaller than our moon, Europa is believed to have twice as much water as Earth. This moon of Jupiter is covered by a thick crust of ice, and beneath it, scientific evidence points to the existence of an enormous global ocean of salt water. It is estimated that this ocean could reach depths of nearly 62 miles, far deeper than Earth's oceans. Europa is also one of the most interesting places in the solar system in the search for potentially habitable environments, since its ocean could remain liquid thanks to heating generated by Jupiter's gravitational forces. The right turn theory states that most people turn to the right when entering a store. It has been suggested that people unconsciously favor this direction because most people are right-handed. There is only one genuine 1983 model year Corvette in the world because all the others from that year were destroyed. Chevrolet built 43 pre-production units while preparing the new C4 generation, but development delays meant that the 1983 model never officially reached dealerships. Almost all of those test vehicles were destroyed, except for one, identified as number 23. This white Corvette survived and is currently part of the collection at the National Corvette Museum in Kentucky, making it a true rarity in the history of the model. In 1066, the last male member of the House of Wessex was elected King of England, but was never crowned because of the Norman conquest that occurred shortly afterward. Pineapple Express is more than a drug reference in a movie. It is also a weather phenomenon that brings moisture from Hawaii to the Pacific Northwest. Life magazine once published a guide with instructions on how to distinguish people of Japanese origin from people of Chinese origin. Most states in the United States have an official state fossil, with the first two being formally designated in 1967. The Zeigarnik effect describes the innate human drive to finish tasks we have started. This tendency to resume an interrupted action is especially common when a goal has not been reached. When mathematician Évariste Galois was still a teenager, he solved a problem that had remained unsolved for 350 years. At the age of 20, for reasons that remain unknown, he took part in a duel and died from the wounds he suffered. The anticoagulant Coumadin, also known as warfarin, was derived from a substance found in moldy clover that was killing cattle. The name warfarin comes from the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, which sponsored the research. The scene in the 1984 movie This Is Spinal Tap, in which the band gets lost backstage, was inspired by a video of Tom Petty walking through a series of doors while trying to find the stage at a venue in Germany, eventually ending up on an indoor tennis court. During the Battle of the Atlantic in World War II, the British Merchant Navy suffered a proportionally higher casualty rate than the armed forces, and sailors' pay was stopped at the exact moment their vessel was struck by a torpedo. After Hurricane Katrina, and because of a miscalculation, the Federal Emergency Management Agency stored 85 million pounds of ice at facilities across the United States and melted it 2 years later after paying $12.5 million in storage costs. Toby Hooper expected the original cut of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to receive a rating suitable for younger audiences because of the lack of explicit violence shown on screen. However, it received an adults-only rating and only obtained a less restrictive classification after several minutes of footage were cut. In addition, police warned certain theaters not to show the movie under threat of charges related to public morality. Former Disney executive Jeffrey Katzenberg tried to discourage Robin Williams from playing the villain Batty Coda in the movie Fern Gully: The Last Rainforest, because Katzenberg wanted Williams only for the voice of the genie in the movie Aladdin. Agent 3355 is one of the earliest female spies in the United States. She was active during the Revolution, but her identity remained secret. In fact, there is ongoing speculation about whether or not she even existed. However, many claim that she was real. It is estimated that nearly 1 billion adults worldwide have sleep apnea, and most cases remain undiagnosed. This disorder causes repeated interruptions in breathing during sleep, which can occur dozens or even hundreds of times in a single night. Obstructive sleep apnea, the most common form, occurs when the airway becomes temporarily blocked during sleep. Common signs include loud snoring, pauses in breathing observed by another person, and daytime sleepiness. Without treatment, it can be associated with an increased risk of high blood pressure and other cardiovascular problems. The Amish have a lower cancer rate than the rest of the population. Some studies conducted in Amish communities in Ohio have found a lower incidence of certain types of cancer compared with the general population. Possible factors include low tobacco and alcohol consumption in many communities, a physically active lifestyle, and certain genetic characteristics. However, the Amish are not protected against cancer, and some hereditary diseases may be more common because of the relative genetic isolation of certain communities. Ted Danson's second wife, producer Cassandra Coates, suffered a stroke while giving birth to their first daughter, Kate. Ted spent several years caring for her and helping with her recovery, and they later adopted a second daughter named Alexis. During World War I, half of the French army mutinied in 1917. The soldiers remained in the trenches but refused to follow orders to attack after the failure of the Nivelle offensive, in which General Nivelle had promised victory within 48 hours. The mutinies were harshly suppressed by the French and were not fully revealed until 1967. There was an activist group in the United Kingdom called the Clandestine Insurgent Rebel Clown Army between 2003 and 2005. In 2005, a gathering of clowns prompted the deployment of 10,000 officers. In 1932, Brazil could not afford to pay for its athletes' trip to the Los Angeles Olympic Games, so it put them aboard a ship filled with coffee. The athletes sold the coffee along the way to finance their trip. In 2017, major tobacco companies were finally forced to run advertisements in the United States, admitting that their products were deadly and addictive. This occurred 11 years after the company's appeals to delay and weaken the nature of the advertisements. The 16th century Swiss alchemist Paracelsus claimed to have created a homunculus, or tiny human being, through a peculiar alchemical experiment that involved keeping certain organic materials in horse manure for 40 days and then continuing a feeding process for another 40 days. In Cowboy Bebop, the English voice actors for Spike Spiegel and Julia, Steve Bloom and Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, are married in real life. The couple married in 2017, nearly 2 decades after working together on the series. A sculpture commemorating Gangnam Style was erected in the district of the same name in Seoul, South Korea. It consists of 2 giant hands making the horseback riding gesture from the music video and plays the song when people stand underneath it. The Song dynasty created paper money to keep up with its thriving economy and also brought it to disaster through hyperinflation. During this period, China developed one of the earliest state-backed paper money systems, which made large transactions easier and eliminated the need to carry heavy quantities of copper coins. The first banknotes, known as jiaozi, emerged among merchants in Sichuan and later came under government control. Over time, authorities issued excessive amounts to finance military spending and other government needs, causing severe depreciation. China's experience thus became one of the earliest historical examples of the risks of issuing too much paper money. In 2006, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the North Korean web portal Naenara, around 300 users gathered to organize a flash mob. The gathering was immediately broken up, and all online chat rooms in North Korea were banned as a result. Police officer John Parker, assigned to guard the entrance to Lincoln's Box at Ford's Theater, was not immediately fired after the assassination. He was even assigned to protect Mary Todd Lincoln afterward, although she quickly dismissed him. Parker was fired in 1868 for falling asleep while on duty. In Africa, rhinos have their horns removed to discourage poaching, resulting in a 30% lower chance that the rhino will be killed by poachers. An artificial heart is only temporary, lasting, for example, less than a year, and is implanted to keep patients alive until they can receive a heart transplant. Total artificial hearts replace the function of both ventricles and maintain blood circulation when the natural heart can no longer do so adequately. Some models have allowed patients to survive for several years while waiting for a compatible organ, so the 1-year limit is not absolute. Unlike ventricular assist devices, which help the existing heart, a total artificial heart mechanically replaces its main pumping chambers. The wrapper on a Hershey's Kiss is called a plume, and it is actually edible. During the Royal Tour of Australia in 1867, several riots took place that left people dead, a structure burned, and Prince Alfred injured. The first commercial patent for a baby cage was filed in 1922 by Emma Reed of Spokane, Washington. Dating game killer Rodney Alcala and torso killer Richard Cottingham worked in the same office at the same time at Blue Cross, although both claimed they had never met. The British Empire was the largest empire in human history, approximately 6 times larger than the Roman Empire, occupying nearly 1/4 of the world. In 1987, two Chicago television stations were hijacked by an unknown person wearing a Max Headroom mask, interrupting the broadcasts with bizarre pirate signals that remain unsolved. The international popularity of the show Top Gear was due in large part to its early episodes being shared illegally on the Final Gear forum when the broadcast was available only in the United Kingdom. When the forum's founder died, Jeremy Clarkson posted a message acknowledging the importance of that platform to the show's success. The intensity of fall colors depends on temperature variation. For example, sunny days with cool, crisp, but not freezing nights produce the best colors. Daylight produces sugars. Cool nights break down chlorophyll, or the green colors. Temperatures above freezing trap sugar in the leaves, and the concentration of sugar leads to color. The character Spock from Star Trek was nearly removed from the series because NBC feared that the Vulcan looked like the devil and might offend religious members of the audience. All Medal of Honor recipients receive a special license plate, depending on the state, to display on their vehicle. In 2021, a woman named Tessica Brown ran out of her usual hair-holding product and used Gorilla Glue spray instead, believing it was hairspray. This caused her hair to become stuck to her scalp, but eventually, a plastic surgeon performed a 4-hour surgical procedure free of charge to remove the adhesive. Silent Hill art director Masahiro Ito drew inspiration for the creation of iconic characters such as Pyramid Head from the surreal and disturbing paintings of British artist Francis Bacon. Book from the Sky was a 1987 book designed in the style of a medieval Chinese manuscript, but the 4,000 Chinese characters it contains were invented by the author and have no meaning. Mongolia has a traditional type of air-dried meat called borts. This meat is usually beef, camel, or goat, and is cut into thin strips that are hung to dry from November to December, when temperatures fall below about 3 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 or 7 days. The unofficial motto of NVIDIA is that the company is 30 days away from going out of business. Owls do not have eyeballs. They have eye tubes. This is why they have to turn their entire heads instead of just their eyes. Their eyes have an elongated shape and remain practically immobile within their sockets, supported by bony structures called sclerotic rings. To compensate for this lack of eye movement, owls can rotate their heads up to about 270 degrees. Their large eyes also provide excellent vision in low-light conditions, a crucial advantage for many species that hunt at night. In addition, they have adaptations in the blood vessels of their necks that allow blood flow to the brain to be maintained during these extensive movements. None of the members of the band The Police were naturally blonde. They began dyeing their hair for an advertisement for the Wrigley brand. During World War II, pilots frequently blacked out during turns because strong G-forces caused blood to pool in their legs. Douglas Bader, a British fighter pilot, did not have this problem because his legs had been amputated after an accident. The largest joint in the human body is the knee, and it is also one of the most complex. It primarily involves the femur, tibia, and kneecap, along with ligaments, tendons, cartilage, and 2 menisci that help distribute loads. The knee supports much of the body's weight when walking, running, jumping, or climbing stairs, and allows flexion, extension, and a small amount of rotation. Because of the tremendous forces placed on it and its constant use, it is also one of the joints most frequently injured, especially the menisci and ligaments. Nancy Sinatra was extremely nervous while recording the title song for the movie You Only Live Twice. Producer John Barry had to construct the final version by combining vocal lines taken from 25 different takes. The Mexican Communist Party was founded by Indian activist M.N. Roy. However, after World War II, Roy lost his faith in traditional Marxism and adopted something known as radical humanism, which is a mixture of socialism and liberalism. The first message sent from the beaches of Normandy on D-Day was transmitted in the Comanche language by Private First Class Larry Sawpity, who sent the message, "We made a good landing. We landed in the wrong place." Wasps of the Thynidae family and the orchid Dracea glyptodon have a curious relationship based on reproductive deception. The female wasp cannot fly, so she positions herself high on plants to attract potential mates. This flower has evolved to mimic the appearance and signals of the female wasp, causing males to mistake it for a mate and, when they approach, carry its pollen. Nearly half of the adult population of the United States is projected to have obesity by the year 2030, according to a 2019 study. The research, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, estimated that prevalence could reach approximately 49% among adults. It also estimated that nearly 1 in 4 could have severe obesity. The projections varied considerably among states and demographic groups, and in some states, obesity could affect more than half of all adults. On January 19, 1876, pieces of red meat fell from the sky over an area measuring 100 by 50 yards near Olympia Springs in Bath County, Kentucky. The incident became known as the Kentucky Meat Shower. The first practical roadside device for testing alcohol consumption was used in 1938 and was called the drunkometer. It was developed by American toxicologist Rolla N. Harger of Indiana University to help police determine whether a driver had consumed alcohol. The device collected a person's breath in a balloon and then passed it through a chemical solution that changed color in the presence of alcohol. Although it was bulky and required several steps, it represented a major advance over relying solely on the driver's behavior. Decades later, it was replaced by smaller and more accurate devices, including the breathalyzer. In the original musical Grease, the character Sandy was not Australian. When she was cast, Olivia Newton-John agreed to accept a lower salary in exchange for rewriting the script to make Sandy Australian, so she would not have to use an American accent. Kamikaze attacks during the Battle of Okinawa were so intense that Admiral Spruance had to change flagships twice, first from the USS Indianapolis to the USS New Mexico, and then to the USS New Jersey. A community of escaped slaves in colonial Brazil founded its own confederated kingdom that lasted nearly 90 years, with a population of around 11,000 people. Since the Middle Ages, the so-called neck verse could save some defendants from receiving the harshest punishments in England. For centuries, benefit of clergy allowed certain people to demonstrate their clerical status through a reading test, for which the first verse of Psalm 51 was traditionally used. Because some defendants came to memorize it, the passage earned the nickname neck verse, since passing the test could allow them to receive more lenient treatment from the courts. During the Napoleonic Wars, French cavalry developed a technique called sabrage, which consists of opening a bottle of champagne with a saber. The person performing it slides the saber along the seam of the bottle's body toward the neck to break off the top. In 1947, a researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison mutated the blue cheese mold and accidentally created a colorless blue cheese. The cheese made from this mutated mold was named New World cheese and is still produced for sale in small quantities. Hotels in the United States now always have ice because at one point they charged for it, and the growing Holiday Inn chain wanted to set itself apart by giving it away for free. Now everyone does it. Kabaddi was an ancient contact sport in which each turn lasts a single breath. Players chant Kabaddi continuously to show that they are not inhaling during their turn. Operation Cottage was intended to seize the last enemy position on North American soil occupied by the Japanese in 1943. By the time the island was declared secure, more than 300 Allied soldiers had been killed or wounded, with no Japanese casualties recorded because they had evacuated the area 3 weeks earlier. Before the reintroduction of the horse to North America, indigenous peoples of the Great Plains used dog-drawn hauling structures to transport goods. The nursery rhyme, "Mary Had a Little Lamb," is a true story about a woman named Mary Elizabeth Sawyer. Prolific Hollywood prosthetic makeup artist Tom Savini served as a combat photographer in Vietnam, and this later influenced his style of bloody effects. Savini said it bothered him to see war movies where someone dies and everyone looks perfect, when in reality, some people die with one eye open and the other half. Years ago, when 2 children were born less than 12 months apart, people called them Irish twins. When a mother had 3 children in 3 years, they were called Irish triplets. This came from a derogatory stereotype about low-income Irish Catholic families having many children in quick succession. Girls from the Cheyenne tribe begin wearing neck rings at around 5 years old. Over time, the coil is replaced with a longer one and more turns are added, eventually making their necks appear to reach a length of approximately 15 inches. The egg-fried rice protests were a form of anti-government protest in China, where internet users post fried rice recipes on October 24th and November 25th. This is in reference to the birth and death of Mao Zedong's son, who was killed by a bomb while cooking outdoors during the Korean War. The name Orca comes from the term Orcinus, meaning belonging to the realm of the dead or related to Orcus. Its scientific name, Orcinus orca, has Latin roots connected to Orcus, a figure in Roman mythology associated with the underworld. Orcas actually belong to the dolphin family and are its largest members. They are found in every ocean on the planet, and different populations have developed very different diets and hunting techniques. Some specialize in fish, while others hunt seals and other marine mammals, passing many of these strategies down through generations. Jimmy Carter promised to reveal all government information about unidentified flying objects if he became president. However, after being elected, he decided not to do so, citing national security concerns. Carter had a personal interest in the subject. In 1969, he and several other people observed a strange light in the Georgia sky, and years later, he filed a report about the incident. During his 1976 presidential campaign, he spoke in favor of greater transparency regarding sightings of unidentified objects. Nearly half of giant panda births can produce twins, but in the wild, the mother usually focuses her care on a single cub, generally the one with the best chance of survival, while the other is usually abandoned. In England during the Middle Ages, a fugitive could claim sanctuary simply by touching the knocker on the outer door of a church, making the person immune from arrest. The B-29 bomber program was the most expensive project of World War II, costing approximately 50% more than the entire Manhattan Project. In Chinese folklore, there is a legendary matchmaker called the Old Man Under the Moon, who binds destined couples together with a silk cord, and whose legends form the basis of the famous Red Thread of Fate. There was a German medical study on injuries caused by shuriken, or ninja stars, using pig cadavers. Researchers threw a cyclone-type shuriken, a plastic one, and a traditional one, and all three were capable of inflicting fatal wounds. The study helped promote discussion about banning shuriken in Germany in 1980. The Ganges River receives around 19 billion gallons of wastewater per day, most of which goes untreated. The problem is especially significant because hundreds of millions of people live in the Ganges Basin, and numerous cities depend on its waters. Over the past several decades, India has launched major projects to build treatment plants, expand sewer networks, and reduce direct discharges. In addition to domestic wastewater, the river receives pollution from industrial and agricultural activities, making its restoration one of the largest river cleanup projects in the world. In 1967, the Canadian Club whiskey brand ran an advertising campaign in which it hid 25 cases of its beverage in exotic locations around the world. 9 cases are still hidden, and one of them is located above the Arctic Circle. One of the parenting strategies of German World War II physician Johanna Harrer was that newborns should be placed in a separate room from their mother for the first 3 months of the child's life, with strictly regulated breastfeeding visits lasting no more than 20 minutes during that period. When the body enters ketosis, as with the ketogenic diet, acetone is exhaled through the breath. Acetone is one of the ketone bodies produced when the body primarily uses fat as an energy source instead of glucose. Because it is volatile, some of it passes from the blood into the lungs and is released when exhaling, which can produce a characteristic slightly sweet or fruity breath. In fact, there are devices capable of measuring breath acetone to estimate the level of ketosis non-invasively, avoiding the need to test blood or urine. 99% of what the British Museum owns is not on display. What is shown to the public amounts to only 1% of the institution's 8 million artifacts. Much of the rest is kept in specialized storage facilities and used for research, loans, and temporary exhibitions. The collection spans nearly 2 million years of human history and brings together objects from virtually every continent. Its holdings range from prehistoric tools and ancient coins to manuscripts, sculptures, and archaeological pieces. In addition, thousands of objects are loaned each year to museums and exhibitions in other parts of the United Kingdom and around the world. In Tudor England, there was a type of criminal known as the bare-breasted trickster. She was a woman who exposed her breasts to lure men into a house, and once the man was inside, the woman's accomplices robbed him. Birds and crocodilians, the order that includes both alligators and crocodiles, share a common cladistic classification called Archosauria, meaning the ruling reptiles. This indicates that they shared a common ancestor about 250 million years ago, along with many types of dinosaurs. In 2012, the Computer History Museum in California sent a team to Sparkler Filters, a company in Texas, to try to convince them to sell their IBM 402 with a Model 129 card punch. In 2013, the company was still using that machine for accounting and inventory work. Deep Purple's song Smoke on the Water is about an incident at a casino where Frank Zappa was performing a concert and a fan fired a flare gun, causing the casino to catch fire and burn down completely. There is a journalistic maxim called Betteridge's Law of Headlines, which states that any headline ending with a question mark can be answered with no. Perry-Romberg syndrome is a disease in which the left half of the face begins to spontaneously shrink and deteriorate. Its cause is unknown, and there is no way to prevent it or stop it once it begins. The unsolved Lady of the Dunes case was finally solved in 2023. It turned out that the killer was her new husband, Guy Muldaven, who died in 2002. The song Baby Shark is considered a traditional work and is in the public domain. Jamie Lee Curtis was given $200 to create Laurie Strode's wardrobe for the movie Halloween in 1978. She got her entire outfit at JCPenney. Snails and slugs shoot arrow-like love darts during mating, which often become embedded in one another. These small calcareous structures appear in various hermaphroditic land species and can reach a considerable length relative to the animal's size. Before exchanging sperm, one individual inserts the dart into its partner's body. The dart is coated with substances that temporarily alter the recipient's reproductive system, increasing the chances that the other individual's sperm will successfully fertilize the eggs. Some species have darts with distinctive shapes and structures that can even help scientists tell them apart. When composer Joseph Haydn died, his head was stolen so it could be studied by people who practiced phrenology, the pseudoscience that studies how the shape of the skull reflects a person's intelligence. His skull was finally returned and buried with the rest of his body in 1954, 145 years later. On May 17, 1996, Chris Hoiles hit a walk-off grand slam in the bottom of the ninth inning with a full count, 2 outs, and his team trailing by 3 runs. It was the second time in Major League Baseball history that this had happened under those conditions. Food companies in the United States are allowed to label a product as having 0 calories if a single serving contains fewer than 5 calories, according to the Food and Drug Administration. Zucchini plants have tiny hairs called trichomes, which are small bristles that can hurt your hands if they are not washed properly. These trichomes especially cover the stems and leaves and function as a natural defense against certain insects and other animals. When handling the plant, the tiny structures can irritate the skin and cause itching or a sensation similar to tiny splinters. For this reason, many gardeners prefer to wear gloves and long sleeves when harvesting zucchini. Interestingly, trichomes are common on many plants and can perform functions as varied as reducing water loss, reflecting excess light, or producing defensive substances. In 1998, Gerald Blanchard parachuted onto an Austrian castle at night to steal the Empress Sisi star jewel. He replaced it with a replica from the gift shop, and the theft went unnoticed for 2 weeks. His daring feat and attention to detail made it one of the most audacious thefts in modern history. The Pizza Crunch dinner is a common meal at Scottish fish and chip shops that consists of a battered, deep-fried pizza instead of a baked one, served with salt, vinegar, or gravy. Robert Remus, also known as WWE's Sergeant Slaughter, never served in the military despite the character he portrayed. He received draft deferments during the Vietnam War and even frequently opposed the conflict, taking part in protests and demonstrations with anti-war movements. When Tsarevich Nicholas, later Nicholas II, visited Japan in 1891, a man with a katana tried to kill him. His cousin, Prince George of Greece, saved his life by deflecting the sword with his cane. In France, it is legal to marry a partner posthumously. This possibility has existed since 1959 and is provided for under the French Civil Code, although it is allowed only under exceptional circumstances. To authorize the marriage, it must be demonstrated that the deceased person had clearly expressed an intention to marry before dying, and the request requires authorization from the President of the Republic. The ceremony takes place without the physical presence of the deceased, and legally, the marriage is considered to have taken place on the day before the person's death. However, it does not automatically grant inheritance rights to the surviving spouse. One of the longest surviving writings in Pompeii is a poem by a woman longing for another woman. The text was found among the numerous pieces of graffiti that survived the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the year 79. Unlike the brief inscriptions commonly found on the city's walls, the poem spans several lines and expresses admiration and desire for another woman. Pompeii's graffiti is especially valuable because it preserved everyday messages written by ordinary people, ranging from declarations of love and jokes to advertisements, insults, and political opinions, offering an unusual glimpse into the private lives of ancient Romans. The first photograph of Earth taken from outer space is about to turn 80 years old. It was captured on October 24, 1946, by a camera installed on 5.2 number 13, a modified German ballistic missile that reached an altitude of about 65 miles. The V comes from the German word Vergeltungswaffe, meaning reprisal weapon or vengeance weapon. At a charity event held in Cleveland in 1986, 1,500,000 balloons were released, causing car accidents, airport closures, and interfering with a Coast Guard search that ended with 2 people drowning. Simon Wells, great-grandson of science fiction author H.G. Wells, who wrote The Time Machine among other works, was hired as a future consultant for the movie Back to the Future Part 2. In 1691, an elderly man from Livonia, around 80 years old, named Thies of Kaltenbrunn, was summoned before a court as a witness to a church robbery, but ended up revealing that he had been a werewolf who descended into hell to fight witches. He also claimed that one of his adversaries had broken his nose with a broom. The judges initially received his stories with disbelief, but they confirmed that his nose really was injured, and several neighbors assured them that he was in full possession of his faculties, so they decided to investigate his claims more seriously. The engagement chicken recipe got its name after Kathy Suter, and several of her co-workers received marriage proposals after serving it to their boyfriends. Oliver Stone was working on a movie called Company Man about the Iran-Contra scandal starring Paul Newman, scheduled to be released just before the 1988 presidential election. When the producers would not guarantee the release date, Stone halted the project to make talk radio instead. Franklin Pierce, the 14th President of the United States, believed that the abolitionist movement was a fundamental threat to the unity of the nation, to the point of alienating anti-slavery groups by signing the Kansas-Nebraska Act and enforcing the Fugitive Slave Act. Auchenblay, a village in Scotland, celebrates Halloween on the last Friday of the month. The Fox television show In Living Color aired a live episode during the halftime show of the 1992 Super Bowl, attracted more than 20 million viewers, and forced the National Football League to rethink its halftime shows, leading to Michael Jackson's iconic performance in 1993. United States President Chester A. Arthur was accused of not being a natural-born citizen because his family moved frequently during his childhood. The Bannister effect occurs when a barrier previously considered unreachable is broken, creating a mental shift that allows others to surpass that limit. It is named after Roger Bannister, who was the first person to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Author Maya Angelou was friends with Martin Luther King Jr. He was assassinated on the writer's 40th birthday, so for many years she did not celebrate her birthday, and instead marked the date only by contacting King's widow. Tweezers are known to have been used in pre-dynastic Egypt. There are drawings of Egyptian craftsmen holding hot pots over ovens with a double bow-shaped tool. A 2013 study found that Vietnamese mothers teach their children to use the toilet by using a whistling sound at specific times. With this process, all children use the potty by 9 months, and by 24 months, toilet training is complete. None of the songwriters of Take Me Home, Country Roads had ever been to West Virginia, and they used an encyclopedia to look up facts about the place. The song was inspired mainly by one of the writer's childhood in Springfield, Massachusetts, but he did not think the word Massachusetts sounded musical. Professionals in psychology and related fields have long viewed sarcasm negatively, particularly noting that it tends to be a maladaptive coping mechanism for people with unresolved anger or frustration. One psychologist even described it as hostility disguised as humor. Pathological demand avoidance is a disorder characterized by extreme and uncontrollable anxiety toward anything perceived as a demand. Those who have it may try to avoid not only demands from others, but also those from their own bodies, such as hunger or sleep. Hara hachibunme is the Japanese belief of eating only until you are about 80% full. There is evidence that following this practice leads to a lower body mass index and greater longevity. The world's oldest man followed this diet. There are enormous walled villages built by the Hakka ethnic group in China. The structures, called tulo, could house up to 800 people inside, with farms, homes, and even markets. They were designed by the Hakka to protect themselves from attacks by the Cantonese ethnic group during one of the many wars they fought. At the time of the French Revolution, most people in France did not speak French. By the late 18th century, much of the population used regional languages or local varieties such as Occitan, Breton, Alsatian, Corsican, Basque, and various oil languages. Standard French was spoken mainly among the elites and in certain urban areas. After the Revolution, the government promoted its use as a common language to strengthen national administration and education. During the 19th century, schooling, military service, the press, and increasing mobility helped spread it until it became the country's dominant language. The United States government once experimented with cloud seeding to weaken hurricanes in what was known as Project Storm Fury, eventually learning that its method merely duplicated a process that already occurs naturally called eye wall replacement. During World War I, German and French soldiers sometimes displayed a live and let live attitude. At times, soldiers refused to attack the other side, and on other occasions, they fired their weapons ceremonially with no intention of harming the enemy. During the filming of the 1997 movie Gummo, Harmony Korine insisted on using real people and locations. Some of the houses were so dirty that most of the film crew insisted on wearing hazardous materials protective suits during filming. Elton John, once dressed in a gorilla suit, ran onto the stage and frightened an extremely intoxicated Iggy Pop. The Knights Hospitaller, one of the many Catholic military orders that fought in the Crusades, still exist today and briefly had an air force. Soccer balls with the black and white hexagon and pentagon pattern, which became the most popular ball style for many years, are based on how the Telstar satellite looked when it was launched in 1960, which made television broadcasts between the Americas and Europe possible. The first ball with this design was made by Adidas in 1970 and was also called Telstar. Until recently, in 2009, in China there were still elementary schools sponsored by cigarette brands. One school in the province of Shijiazhuang had a sign that said, "Tobacco can help you become a winner," which is not true. Dogs now watch more television thanks to the high-definition screens that exist today. Televisions with the older CRT technology were too blurry for dogs to see clearly. That is why there are now many more funny videos of dogs and other animals watching movies. If all the salt in the ocean could be extracted and spread evenly over all the land on Earth, it would form a layer about 492 feet deep, roughly the height of a 40-story building. In Fairbanks, Alaska, it is illegal for a moose to enter a bar. This law was created because the owner of one of these establishments liked to keep his moose there and get it drunk. The animal would sometimes go very crazy and destroy things. Physicists have demonstrated that throwing the ball upward to score baskets in basketball during free throws exactly in this way is the best technique to score points, but NBA players refuse to do it because it looks silly. The animated series Rick and Morty is made using only 3 computer programs that are available to anyone at affordable prices. For animation, they use Toon Boom Harmony. For background art, they use Photoshop. And for post-production, effects, and touch-ups, they use After Effects. However, it still takes a team of 50 artists and animators to produce the episodes. There is an edible mushroom that grows in almost all parts of the world, called Watiparus. It is famous because its taste is similar to fried chicken. It is popularly known as chicken of the woods, and usually grows in large clusters on tree trunks, especially oaks. Its fibrous texture resembles white meat, and that is why it is widely used as a plant-based substitute in different cuisines. Sloths can hold their breath for 40 minutes underwater. That is longer than a dolphin can hold its breath before surfacing for air. They achieve this by reducing their heart rate and moving extremely slowly to conserve oxygen. On average, almost 4.4 pounds of your total body weight consist of millions and millions of microorganisms living inside your digestive system that help you digest food. There is a lake in Palau, a country in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where jellyfish evolved without stingers. This happened after the lake lost its connection to the sea, leaving these animals isolated from their natural predators. Now these jellyfish are harmless, and people can swim with them. M&Ms, despite having different colors, all actually taste the same. They do not have any special flavoring that differentiates them. The color is only in the outer sugar coating, while the chocolate inside is the same. There was a period of time when the Aston Martin car factory had only one manufacturing robot that applied adhesives to bond aluminum parts. They called it James Bonder, as a reference to the English word bond, meaning to join or glue, and also to the character James Bond, who drives a car from this brand. Squirrels can adopt baby squirrels they see that need care or that were abandoned. This behavior has been observed mainly in red squirrels, where females can take care of orphaned young if they are close relatives, such as nieces or granddaughters. Studies suggest that this adoption increases the survival of shared genes within the group, which is known as kin selection. Although it is not extremely common, it shows that even small wild mammals can display complex social behaviors. There is a sea snail that uses a metal shell. In reality, its exoskeleton contains iron sulfide. It is the only animal that contains this material. It lives near hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the Indian Ocean, where the water reaches extreme temperatures and is full of minerals. Former President of Liberia, Charles King, holds the record for the most fraudulent election of all time. He won the presidential election in 1927 with more than 234,000 votes in a country that had only 15,000 possible voters. 5% of people will never experience a headache in their entire lives. Although it may seem incredible, various medical surveys have shown that a small fraction of the population claims to have never suffered this type of pain, not even in common situations such as stress, dehydration, or colds. Experts believe that genetic factors, higher pain thresholds, and differences in nervous system sensitivity may influence this phenomenon. In contrast, the vast majority of people experience headaches at least once a year. The white part of human eyes evolved to serve as another method of nonverbal communication. It makes it easier to follow gaze direction and understand intentions or emotions. The most common birthday of all is September 16th. This means more people have birthdays on that day than on any other day of the year. September is generally the month with the most birthdays. If you put a grape cut in half but still connected by the skin into a microwave oven, it can generate a ball of plasma fire. Your body is made up of more atoms than the number of stars in the Milky Way. It is estimated that an average human has around 7 octillion atoms in total. The annual cycling competition, Giro d'Italia, had a prize for the person who finished in last place, which consisted of a black jersey. It was meant as a tradition, but cyclists began competing each year to see who would finish last, hiding in places and even puncturing their own tires, so the prize was awarded only 6 times before being canceled. The Flatiron Building in New York, built in 1902, caused so many wind currents due to its shape that when women walked by, their skirts would be lifted, revealing their ankles and part of their legs. The phenomenon became so famous that groups of young men would gather nearby to witness the involuntarily indecent act. There is a bank in Italy that accepts Parmesan cheese in exchange for low-interest loans. Currently, there are 430,000 wheels of Parmesan cheese aging there. Actor Jim Carrey hired a CIA undercover agent trainer to teach him techniques to endure the torture of the makeup process while filming the movie The Grinch. Each day, he had to sit for 8 hours without moving while being made up. The advice this expert gave him was to hit himself on the leg and eat everything he could find. In Denmark, there is an underground vault that contains all the Lego sets that exist so far. It is located at the company headquarters in Billund and functions as a historical archive where at least one copy of every commercially released model since the mid-20th century is preserved. The collection includes thousands of sealed boxes, catalogs, and prototypes stored in controlled conditions to preserve their original state. It is a kind of time capsule that documents the evolution of design, engineering, and popular culture through the famous bricks. The screenwriter of the movie Castaway lived on a deserted island on purpose to research and improve his script. One day, he observed how a volleyball washed ashore. He used the event as inspiration to create Wilson, Tom Hanks's companion ball in the movie. Using recycled glass to make new glass requires 40% less energy than making it from scratch with new materials. This is because broken glass melts at a lower temperature than the sand and materials used to make new glass. Paved streets that have a shiny appearance are partly made with recycled glass. There is a large number of radioactive wild boars in Germany that became contaminated by the radioactivity left by the Chernobyl disaster many years ago. They continued to reproduce more and more. This sounds like a bad movie. WhatsApp co-founder Brian Acton was rejected in a job interview at Facebook. 5 years later, Facebook bought his company WhatsApp for $19 billion. Sign language is considered one of the three official languages of New Zealand. The other two are English and Maori. In 1994, a FedEx cargo plane suffered an attempted hijacking by an angry employee armed with a hammer. The crew attempted extreme maneuvers with the aircraft in an effort to throw the attacker off balance, and they even flew upside down. In the end, they managed to subdue the angry man. This also sounds like a movie. The white trails that airplanes leave behind in the sky are the result of burning fuel in their engines. When combustion occurs, carbon dioxide and water are released, which condense into tiny droplets that are basically what clouds are made of. What we commonly call getting goosebumps is actually a remnant from when our ancestors had more body hair. When we were scared, the hair would stand up and make us appear larger to intimidate predators. A teacher from Utah, United States, was fired because she created a blog about homophones. Homophones are words that sound the same but mean different things and can also be spelled differently. In the late 19th century, an archaeologist named Augustus Le Plongeon claimed in one of his studies that the Mayan civilization originated on a lost continent called Mu, located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Today we know that was completely false. In 1997, Microsoft saved Apple from bankruptcy by investing $150 million. Steve Jobs managed to secure this deal in exchange for Apple dropping a lawsuit in which they claimed that Windows had copied elements from Mac OS. The characteristic smell that elderly people have is caused by a chemical substance called 2-nonanol that is secreted through the skin. This compound begins to be produced more frequently after the age of 40, when certain metabolic processes change and the oxidation of skin lipids increases. Unlike other body odors, it is not necessarily related to hygiene, but to natural changes in the body. There is a water bottle that fills itself by condensing atmospheric moisture using solar energy. It uses special materials that capture water vapor from the air and convert it into drinkable liquid. When the Persians set out to invade Greece expecting an easy victory about 25 centuries ago, they brought a block of marble to build a monument celebrating their win. However, they lost in what would become known as the Battle of Marathon. That marble block was used by the Greeks to create the statue of Nemesis, the goddess of divine justice. Female Greenland sharks reach maturity at around 150 years of age. This species, scientifically known as Somniosis microcephalus, is one of the longest living vertebrates on the planet and can easily surpass 400 years of life. It inhabits cold and deep waters of the North Atlantic and the Arctic, where its extremely slow metabolism delays its growth and development. Scientists estimated its age by analyzing proteins from the lens of the eye, a technique that revealed that its life cycle is extraordinarily slow. According to scientific studies, dogs dream regularly. This can be noticed when they move while sleeping. They usually dream about normal activities, such as playing with a ball. The egg ovens of ancient Egypt that were used as incubators to hatch chickens were capable of incubating thousands of eggs every 3 weeks, and their design was so perfect that more than 200 are still in use today. Company executives in China can be sentenced to death if they commit fraud. In the Chinese legal system, certain economic crimes considered to be of great magnitude, especially those involving enormous financial losses or seriously affecting the public, can receive extremely severe penalties, including capital punishment. In recent years, there have been cases of high-level executives convicted of multi-million-dollar fraud, corruption, or embezzlement schemes. The longest interval ever recorded between the birth of one twin and the other is 87 days. Usually, they are born only minutes apart. The most populated and largest city in the world, where French is spoken, is not Paris or Montreal. It is Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which has more than 13 million inhabitants. Mike the Headless Chicken is a chicken that survived 18 months after his head was cut off. The event occurred in 1945 in Colorado, when the farmer who attempted to slaughter him did not completely sever the brain stem or the jugular vein, which allowed the bird to maintain basic functions. His owner fed him with a dropper directly into the esophagus and cleaned the mucus to prevent him from choking. Over time, he became a national attraction and generated significant income at fairs and shows. In the city of Ankara in Turkey, there was a giant statue of a robot that was made simply because the mayor came up with the idea. Shortly afterward, it was replaced with a Tyrannosaurus statue. Due to the lack of family and friends at his funeral, the pallbearers of Lee Harvey Oswald, the assassin of John F. Kennedy, were reporters. When you get angry, your face turns red because your heart is beating faster to send more blood to your muscles. This reaction is part of the fight or flight mechanism, activated by the release of adrenaline and other stress hormones. The blood vessels in the face dilate, increasing blood flow in the skin and causing visible redness. At the same time, the body prepares for a possible physical confrontation, increasing muscle tension and breathing rate, even if the situation does not end up requiring action. The inventor of the upside-down ketchup bottle that has made our lives so much easier has earned up to $13 million to date. The Colca Canyon, located in Peru, is approximately 13,650 feet deep, more than twice as deep as the Grand Canyon in the United States. Despite having billions of neurons, the brain cannot feel pain. This is because brain tissue itself does not possess nociceptors, which are the receptors responsible for detecting painful stimuli. That is why, during certain neurological surgeries, patients can remain awake without the brain experiencing direct pain. However, the structures surrounding it, such as the meninges, blood vessels, and scalp, do have pain receptors, and when they become inflamed or tense, they can cause severe headaches. The Greta Odo butterfly has transparent wings. The space between its veins has colorless scales, which allows light to pass through and gives it this effect that helps it evade predators. It is also called the glass wing butterfly. In 1859, the government of France established a law requiring all orchestras to play at a similar tuning, since in previous decades, orchestras had been raising pitch levels to achieve a generally sharper sound, which caused problems such as broken strings and singers with vocal cord issues. Rats can squeeze through a hole as small as 1/4 of their size thanks to their collapsible skeleton. In reality, it is not that their bones bend, but that their rib cage is very flexible, and if their head can pass through an opening, the rest of their body can almost always pass through as well. The first food consumed on the moon by astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin consisted of bacon cubes, peaches, cookies, grapefruit juice, and coffee that were stored in the lunar module. The United States Air Force managed to save more than 10% on fuel, equivalent to millions of dollars, thanks to the fact that about 10 years ago, they copied the V formation used by geese when flying. An episode of Peppa Pig had to be banned in Australia, where the anthropomorphic pig Peppa was shown being friendly with spiders, something that, in Australia, is truly dangerous. Even the most harmless spider there is a creature out of your nightmares that can kill you. Bad Peppa. Greeting with a fist bump has been scientifically proven to be a more hygienic and safer way to greet someone than shaking hands. This is because there is less contact and less transfer of bacteria between people. Sobhuza II was the king of Swaziland in Africa for 82 years, which made him the longest reigning king in history. He had 70 wives, 210 children, and nearly 1,000 grandchildren. Victoria's Secret model Karolina Karkova was born without a belly button due to a complication at birth. Editors have a catalog of belly buttons in different positions so they can Photoshop them onto photos where she appears in underwear or a bikini. When Star Trek: The Next Generation aired in 1987, the speed of the computers in the series was 60,000 times faster than what existed in real life at that time. Today, the computers we have are 500 times faster than those in the television show. There are 1,750 species of cactus, of which 1,749 are native to the American continent. The only cactus that naturally grows elsewhere, according to botanical records, is Rhipsalis bacifera, which is found throughout the tropics of Africa and in Sri Lanka, although it is believed to have reached the other side of the world through bird migration or on trading ships centuries ago. In Lithuania, there is a theme park where you can experience being a citizen of the Soviet Union. Visitors have their belongings confiscated, are interrogated, have to wear a gas mask, and must learn the Soviet anthem. In the end, everyone receives a ration of vodka. The 6 main actors of the series Friends negotiated to receive 2% of the show's profits for the rest of their lives. This show still generates $1 billion per year. That means each of the 6 friends earns $20 million per year, of course, for having made the series. When he was in high school, Bill Gates was assigned to write a program that organized student schedules and classes, and when he turned it in, no one noticed that he had intentionally set it up so he would have classes with a majority of women. In 1993, Pepsi ran a promotion in the Philippines where you could win 1 million Philippine pesos if you found the number 349 inside the bottle cap. Pepsi accidentally printed 800,000 winning caps. The anger of the people was very great, and brand executives even received death threats. A Pinocchio movie was going to be released in 1936, 4 years before the Disney version that we all know. It was going to be the first Italian animated movie ever, but for unknown reasons, it was never completed and is considered permanently lost. The NASA Vehicle Assembly Plant is such a large and spacious building that it needs more than 11 short tons of air conditioning equipment to prevent clouds from forming inside and creating a micro-ecosystem on humid days. Queen Elizabeth II received her first corgi in 1933 when she was still a child. From then on, she developed a great fondness for this breed, and throughout her life, she had more than 30 corgis, in addition to some dorgies, which were crosses between corgis and dachshunds. In 2022, the year of her death, she still had 4 dogs, which were later adopted by Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. When a person was accused during the Holy Inquisition, they were first cordially given a 30-day extension to prove their beliefs. Most people were able to do so, but those who could not, well, you already know what happened to them. A trained raven named Jimmy appeared in more than 1,000 Hollywood movies between 1934 and 1954, including It's a Wonderful Life and The Wizard of Oz. In addition, he received a special medal for more than 200 hours of entertaining war veterans. He is considered one of the most successful animal actors. In Poland, there is a forest where there are more than 400 pine trees that are bent 90 degrees near their base and have a curved shape. They all point north for some reason. These trees disprove the famous saying, "A tree that grows crooked will never have its branch straighten." There are the same number of kangaroos in Australia as there are people in Colombia. It is estimated that there are around 50 million kangaroos, and their population grows quickly because they have few natural predators and a great ability to reproduce. Air traffic controllers are required to take a break every 2 hours, since it has been observed that if they work longer than that in a continuous session, their effectiveness can drop considerably, and they may make mistakes even with low levels of traffic. Hawaiian pizza was invented in Canada at the Satellite Restaurant in Ontario in 1962. It was created by Sam Panopoulos, a Greek immigrant who decided to add canned pineapple to a ham pizza as an experiment inspired by the sweet and sour combination of Asian cuisine he was trying at the time. The name Hawaiian does not refer to the place where it was created, but to the brand of pineapple used. Over time, it became one of the most controversial and popular pizzas in the world. The Great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt is so old that the first restoration done to it after it was uncovered was carried out by the ancient Egyptians themselves about 3,500 years ago. By that time, it had already been built for 1,000 years. It took humanity 4 times longer to stop using copper swords and switch to steel swords than it took to go from steel swords to nuclear weapons. In 1898, Nikola Tesla made many people believe he could control a toy boat by shouting commands at it. In reality, he had invented radio control and was controlling the boat himself. 75% of all sesame seeds grown in Mexico end up on McDonald's hamburger buns, which are distributed to their locations all over the world. There are 37 million companies in the entire world, but only 147 have taken control of 40% of all the wealth on the planet. Before becoming an app that identifies songs, Shazam was a phone service you could call when you wanted to know the name of a song, and the result would arrive shortly afterward by text message. In the Charles Chaplin movie Modern Times, there is a scene where the actor is skating at the edge of a floor, and it appears that he is about to fall. In reality, there was no danger for Chaplin because that part of the structure was actually drawn on a sheet of glass placed in front of the camera. That is how they achieved the famous effect. Media coverage of the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963 coincided with the day the first episode of Doctor Who aired. As a result, the BBC decided to rebroadcast it 1 week later after realizing that almost no one had seen it. The record for the longest marriage is 90 years. It was achieved by Karam and Kartari Chand in England. He was 110 and she was 103. Unfortunately, in October 2016, Karam died of natural causes. If you think about it, the real objective of golf is to play less golf. The winner is the one who hits the ball fewer times. So I will leave you with that to think about all night. The cheese used by most pizza chains, such as Domino's, Pizza Hut, and Papa John's, is sold by the same company, Leprino Foods, which sells approximately 551,156 short tons of cheese each year and earns $3 billion. In ancient Egypt, actors were forbidden from testifying in court because they were seen as professional liars. You can buy a refurbished Boeing 727 airplane adapted for private use with capacity for 23 people for less money than it costs to buy a Ferrari. The Michelin Man, the mascot of Michelin tires, was created before tires were black, which is why he is white. Before 1912, car tires were light-colored, but later carbon was added so they would last longer and the rubber would be stronger. People who sleep as they came into the world, that is, naked, are more satisfied with their relationships according to a study. Some surveys conducted in the United Kingdom found that those who sleep without clothes report higher levels of happiness in their relationships compared to those who wear pajamas. Researchers suggest that skin-to-skin contact may promote the release of oxytocin, a hormone associated with bonding and trust. In addition, sleeping naked has also been linked to better regulation of body temperature and greater comfort during the night. Kangaroos cannot walk backward. Even if they truly try, their hind legs combined with their tail prevent them from doing so. That is why they appear on the Australian coat of arms as a symbol of continuous progress. In 2004, 6 British soldiers became trapped in caves in the state of Puebla in Mexico. They were stuck for 8 days after refusing local help until British divers arrived. This caused diplomatic tension between the two countries, as it was speculated that they were searching for uranium deposits. The kissing scene in the 2014 movie Noah was repeated so many times that Emma Watson ended up with blood on her lips, and Douglas Booth with a dry nose and lips. In the city of Los Angeles, in the United States, there are more cars than people. This is due to its large size, low urban density, and strong dependence on private transportation. Through a process called grafting, it is possible to make a single tree produce 2 or more different fruits. You simply attach a branch from another variety to an existing tree and wait for them to fuse. This has led to the creation of trees that produce up to 40 different fruits. According to an experiment conducted by researchers at the University of Minnesota, people who have a messy environment, for example their desk, have more creative ideas and could be considered more intelligent, since messy spaces inspire breaking away from tradition, which can produce new ways of approaching situations. Bruce Lee was a fan of boxer Muhammad Ali and watched all of his recorded fights over and over again. When he was once asked whether he would like to fight him, he said he would lose immediately because Ali's fists were too large. The hobby of Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario Brothers and Company, is trying to guess how tall objects are. He enjoys it so much that he always carries a measuring tape with him. If you cut a cactus in the state of Arizona in the United States, you can be penalized with up to 25 years in prison, since it is similar to cutting a protected tree species. Genghis Khan exempted the poor from paying taxes, established freedom of religious beliefs, and offered people the opportunity to join his empire before being conquered and probably killed. In 1996, Bear Grylls broke his back after falling more than 2 miles when his parachute failed. 2 years later, he climbed to the summit of Mount Everest. His secret is drinking his own urine, apparently. Clement Vallandigham, a defense attorney, accidentally shot himself while demonstrating the possibility that the victim had shot himself instead of being shot by his client, who turned out to be innocent thanks to the demonstration. The best lawyer of all time. In 2012, French beekeepers could not solve the mystery of the blue and green honey they were producing, until they realized that their bees liked to visit a local M&M's factory. The Supreme Court of Italy established that stealing small amounts of food to avoid starving is not a crime. In 2009, Amazon sold diapers so cheaply that it lost more than $100 million, all to force Diapers.com to sell them their business. There is an action figure of the famous painting The Scream by Edvard Munch that has joints that bend so you can put it in all kinds of poses. Shut up and take my money. The King of Jordan, Abdullah bin al-Hussein, was an extra in the 1996 episode of Star Trek Voyager titled Investigations. The last time all humans were together on planet Earth was on November 2nd, 2000. Since that date, the International Space Station has been occupied by at least two people. Approximately 25% of men in Russia die before the age of 60 due to the amount of vodka they consume. There are more people in the Tokyo metropolitan area than in all of Canada. There is a club of people who look like the writer Ernest Hemingway that has more than 100 members. In half of the households in Asia and Africa, people pay a license to have television each year. The grill marks on meat from fast food restaurants, in almost all cases, are only fake marks painted on with coloring, since they do not use grills to cook them. Humans are slightly bioluminescent. That means we emit light, but it is so weak that it cannot be seen. This was discovered with the help of super-sensitive cameras. To film scenes lit only by candlelight in the movie Barry Lyndon, director Stanley Kubrick used special camera lenses made by Carl Zeiss. Of the 10 that were produced, 3 were sold to Kubrick and the others to NASA, which commissioned them to photograph the dark side of the moon. When the final match of the 1950 World Cup in Brazil ended, the famous Maracanazo, 3 people died from heart attacks caused by the shock of seeing their team lose. In the past, commercial flights were allowed to deviate from their route if they wanted, and sometimes they did so to let passengers see important landmarks. This practice stopped after 2 airplanes collided mid-air over the Grand Canyon in 1956. Andromeda is not the closest galaxy to the Milky Way, where our solar system is located. The Canis Major dwarf galaxy is 100 times closer than Andromeda, at 42,000 light-years from the center of the Milky Way. A woman in England has 4 color cones in her eyes, unlike the 3 that we normally have. This allows her to see 99 million more colors than average people. According to a study that was conducted, people who post their exercise routines on Facebook are more likely to have psychological problems. This is related to the search for external validation and the constant need for social approval. Actor Charles Chaplin was so popular in 1917 that 9 out of 10 people who attended a costume party that year were dressed as him, according to a survey conducted at the time. Christopher Nolan thought the character of Catwoman would be too exaggerated and overacted for the movie Batman: The Dark Knight Rises, but his brother Jonathan convinced him to add her to the script. It is possible to rent a goat service to mow your lawn and get rid of invasive weeds. This is a natural alternative to using chemicals to do this job, so we should give goats some work. Mark Zuckerberg had never tried an appletini until he saw it in a scene from the movie The Social Network, where the character representing him orders one. When he tried this cocktail in real life, he liked it so much that he made it Facebook's official drink. In 2012, mathematician V. Hart sent an open letter to Nickelodeon Studios to inform them that the pineapple where SpongeBob lives has a geometrically impossible design. The creator of the pineapple responded on his blog, saying they would change it to a mathematically correct design. That is the one now used in the show. Singer Billie Eilish suffers from Tourette syndrome, which consists of having involuntary movements known as tics. Her fans noticed and even made compilations until the singer-songwriter spoke about it and confirmed it. Now she speaks openly about it and has helped others who also have it feel more confident. The population of the city of Rome reached a peak of 1 million when Augustus was emperor during the Roman Empire about 2,000 years ago, but it declined when the empire fell. It was not until the early 1930s that the city surpassed 1 million residents again. The astronauts of Apollo 11 could not get life insurance. No company wanted to provide it, so they signed photographs for their families to auction in case the landing failed and they all died. On average, 30 supernovas occur every second in the observable universe. In the Milky Way, only one occurs every 50 years. This helps us grasp the incredible size of the universe. Each supernova can shine brighter than an entire galaxy for a brief time. When Halley's Comet passed close to Earth in 1910 and the planet moved through the trail it left in space, there was widespread concern among people because it was believed the gases from the comet could wipe out all living beings. So there were many sales of gas masks and anti-comet pills that obviously did nothing. One day, Charlie Sheen spent $6,500 on 2,615 seats at the Anaheim Stadium to catch a home run with 3 friends. There was not a single home run in the game that day. Typical Charlie Sheen. The moon orbits from west to east, but we see it moving in the opposite direction. This happens because the rotation of the Earth is faster. It is like riding in a fast car and observing those who are moving more slowly. There is a species of grasshopper that, during its larval stage, develops tiny gears that help it gain more power in its legs to jump. However, it loses them as it reaches adulthood. It is the only animal discovered so far that evolved to have mechanical gears. Redundant acronym syndrome is when one of the words that make up an acronym is used separately along with the abbreviation. For example, VAT tax or HIV virus. When Google bought the GPS and traffic app Waze in 2013, each of the 100 employees of the company received $1.2 million. The waffle-style shoe sole comes from shoes designed by Bill Bowerman, the founder of Nike, who literally poured rubber into his wife's waffle iron to make them. Last year, an injured turtle was found in a forest in Brazil. It had lost almost all of its shell. Some specialists created one for it using 3D printing, and an artist painted it to look like its original shell. In 2014, a man escaped from a prison in England because, according to him, he was tired of the rap music they played in the section where his cell was. It played day and night. Voice actress Catherine Beaumont voiced Alice in the movie Alice in Wonderland in 1951 when she was 13 years old, and she reprised the same character 50 years later in the video game Kingdom Hearts at 64 years old. In the Amazon rainforest, there are butterflies that drink from the tears of turtles to supplement their diet with sodium. This behavior is called lacryphagy, and it is necessary because in that environment, sodium is scarce and vital for their survival. The hallucinations caused by schizophrenia are influenced by culture. Americans who suffer from this disease tend to hear more paranoid and aggressive voices, while people in India and Africa hear more positive and comforting voices. Google makes changes and updates to its search engine algorithms every 17.5 hours on average. This means it is constantly changing, and the current version can be very different from the one a week ago, even though to users it appears identical. Sergeant Stubby is the most decorated dog of the First World War. He saved his regiment from several mustard gas attacks and warned them when an attack was approaching. After the war, he appeared in parades and met 3 presidents. Musicians who worked with jazz singer Ella Fitzgerald used her voice to tune their instruments, since she had perfect pitch and intonation and could give them the correct note. Cuttlefish can change color almost instantly to blend in with their surroundings and evade predators, even though they are colorblind. They achieve this thanks to special cells called chromatophores, which expand or contract under direct control of the nervous system. They also have iridophores and leucophores that reflect light and create complex patterns in fractions of a second. Although they do not distinguish colors like we do, they perceive contrasts and the polarization of light, which allows them to adjust their camouflage with surprising precision even on very varied backgrounds. Old New York City subway cars are dumped into the Atlantic Ocean to help form new artificial coral reefs and allow marine life to flourish. The National Museum of Natural History in Helsinki, Finland, was invaded by the Chilean recluse spider, which is considered dangerous due to its venom, and no one knows how those spiders arrived there, since they are normally found only in Central and South America. According to a study, the average woman will spend 17 years of her life on a diet. This figure comes from surveys conducted in different countries, where many women begin dieting in adolescence and repeat it intermittently over decades. On average, they may start their first diet around 15 years old and try dozens of different regimens during their lives. Because of the way the speed of light works, there are parts of the universe that are impossible to see and visit, since the universe is expanding faster in terms of distance than the speed of light. There is a giant cloud of water vapor in a region of the Milky Way that contains more than 100 trillion times the amount of water found on planet Earth. Water is more abundant in the universe than we previously thought. Elephants can reach things that are up to approximately 23 feet high with their trunks. This is because they combine the length of their trunk, which can measure around 6.5 feet, with the height of their own body and the ability to stretch on their hind legs in certain situations. Their trunk contains more than 40,000 individual muscles, which allows them to perform extremely precise movements, from pulling leaves from the tops of trees to picking up objects as small as a coin without damaging it. There was a time, thousands and thousands of years ago, when the atmosphere had a higher amount of oxygen, which made it easier for many animals to grow to almost giant sizes, especially insects. All kinds of super insects existed on Earth. The Soviet Union refused to hold the Paralympic Games that were supposed to take place after the Moscow 1980 Olympic Games. The event had to be held in the Netherlands. A perfect Oreo cookie should have a ratio of 71% cookie and 29% filling. The reason why almost all airplanes are white is because light colors reflect more of the sun's rays. This prevents the interior from heating up as much and also protects parts that are susceptible to damage from high temperatures. It is like putting sunscreen on them. In the movie Cars, a car with the Apple logo and the number 84 appears for a few seconds. This car was added in honor of Steve Jobs, who was one of the early investors in Pixar and served as its CEO until 2006. The number 84 is because the first Macintosh computer was released in 1984. The rumor that you should not throw rice at weddings because pigeons and birds can explode due to moisture absorption in their insides is completely false. Thanks to the reflective properties of water, a laser can remain contained inside it, forming a kind of laser waterfall. This occurs due to total internal reflection, the same principle used by fiber optics to guide light. The ratatouille dish served in the movie of the same name was prepared by chef Thomas Keller, one of the most successful chefs, and then digitally recreated for the film. Boxer Evander Holyfield lost more than 13 pounds in order to participate in his first title fight. When he won, he had to be hospitalized immediately. He required more than 2 gallons of intravenous fluids to recover. Vietnam is one of the countries where people agree the most with American policies and way of life. Despite their history of conflict, 76% of the population is in favor, which is a higher percentage than places like Japan, France, and even the United Kingdom. In 2004, Mark Zuckerberg offered Joe Green, his college roommate, the chance to drop out of school and join Facebook in exchange for shares in the company, but the offer was rejected. Today, those shares would be worth more than $10 billion. Around 17% of twins are left-handed, compared to non-twins where only 10% are. The McDonald's restaurant located in Sedona, Arizona in the United States has the only logo in the chain that is not the traditional yellow color. It was painted blue so it would blend better with the desert environment. The blue contrasts with the sand color, as if it were the sky. The Pink Floyd album Atom Heart Mother on vinyl plays indefinitely when it reaches the end. Unlike most records, it includes a special groove that sends the needle back to the same position again and does not stop until it is manually removed. Beauty pageants for children under 16 years old are banned in France and can be punished with 2 years in prison and a fine of up to approximately $32,000. Scorpions can survive after spending a night frozen or a full day under the sun. They are extremely resilient. Their extremely slow metabolism allows them to tolerate extreme environmental conditions. There are solid chemical substances that attract so much moisture that when exposed to normal atmospheric conditions, they become liquid after absorbing all the humidity in the air. This process is called deliquescence. In London, there are more Indian restaurants than in Mumbai or Delhi, the most populated cities of that country. This is what an albino peacock looks like. Most animals can be born with this condition, and some look more interesting than others. 99% of the Jews in Denmark survived the Second World War because they were evacuated just in time to Sweden, which was neutral at that time. The airport in Genoa, Italy, is one of the few where an exception allows liquids to be carried onto an airplane, but only if you are transporting pesto, the traditional sauce from that region. It must be scanned using a special pesto scanner. Halle Berry is named that way thanks to a store. Her parents named her after the Halle store located in Cleveland, United States. The Central Intelligence Agency of the United States reads more than 5 million tweets per day. If they do not find anything bad, at least they enjoy the memes. The company Ray-Ban is responsible for the resurgence of Wayfarer-style sunglasses, which almost no one was wearing in the early 1980s. To counter this, they launched a campaign to have them appear in 60 movies and television shows each year. City birds have gotten used to building their nests with cigarette butts. Burned nicotine helps repel parasites. There is a species of squid that uses water pressure like a jet engine, allowing it to fly and travel approximately 98 feet through the air before falling back into the water. In 2006, a reality show called Unanimous was created, in which 9 strangers were locked inside a bunker for an indefinite amount of time and could only leave once they unanimously decided who among them would keep the prize of $1.5 million. However, the longer it took, the more the prize money was reduced, and in the end, the winner left with only $382,000. According to a study, birds never collide with other birds in the air because they always turn to the right. Research on flocks has observed that many birds tend to veer slightly to that side when approaching head-on, which reduces the risk of collisions. This behavior could be related to brain lateralization, meaning a natural preference for processing certain stimuli with a specific hemisphere. In general, products that say on the label that they are low in fat actually contain the same number of calories and, instead of fat, they have more added sugar. Of those two things, good fats are better for health. If you fail your driving test 3 times in Switzerland, you will be assigned a psychologist so they can determine the reason for your failures. Once the psychologist reports that you are fit to take the test again, you may try one more time. Open Cola is an open-source, cola-flavored, carbonated beverage brand. That means the instructions to prepare it are available to everyone and can be modified. The actor who played James Bond in the 1970s, George Lazenby, was actually not an actor. He bought a suit, a watch, and dressed up to go audition and made up that he had appeared in movies. That is how he got the role of Agent 007. Iceland is located on the mid-Atlantic ridge, where the North American and European tectonic plates meet, so this country could be considered part of both America and Europe at the same time. It is the only place in the world where you can walk between the two sides. The author of the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was a chocolate taster for the company Cadbury when he was a child, but at least they did not make him disappear. That much we know. The most complete and best preserved Tyrannosaurus rex skeleton that exists, called Sue, was going to be sold to a private collection. But companies like Disney and McDonald's helped finance the museum where it is now so it could remain there. Necroplanetology is the study of planets in planetary systems that have been destroyed. By analyzing the floating ruins they left behind, scientists can create a virtual reconstruction of what they once looked like. 47 million years ago, whales walked on land. Their ancestors were mammals similar to small carnivorous deer that lived near rivers and coasts. Over time, they developed legs more adapted for swimming, noses that migrated to the top of the skull, and more streamlined bodies. Fossils found in Asia show clear intermediate stages of this evolutionary transition, one of the best documented examples of how a land animal returned to the sea. When the then President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, visited Japan, he told a joke in English during a speech, and the Japanese interpreter translated it as, "President Carter told a joke, everyone must laugh," and everyone present laughed a lot. When the founder of the Stanford University Sleep Research Center, William Dement, who has 50 years of experience, was asked why we need to sleep every night, he replied that the only solid reason they have discovered so far is because we get very sleepy. Seriously, that is what he said. There are more chickens in the United States than there are people in the entire world. In that country, there are more than 9 billion chickens, raised mainly for the production of meat and eggs throughout the year. The giant checks commonly used at award events or charity donations are not just for the photo. In theory, they can be cashed at most banks. However, an extra fee may be charged for the service. An American college student who wrote an article criticizing seatbelts, expressing that they are an intrusion on individual freedoms, died in a car accident in which the other 2 people in the truck survived. He was the only one not wearing a seatbelt. If you enter a black hole, the most likely thing to happen to you is a phenomenon called spaghettification, which consists of the stretching of objects into thin, elongated shapes. So, yes, that can literally happen to you. Dogs that sniff illegal substances and bombs can become depressed if they do not find any after a long time. That is why they are occasionally taken on test missions to satisfy their predatory instincts. The NFL owns the term Super Bowl. Therefore, it cannot be used except by official sponsors. For this reason, many advertisements prefer to call it the Big Game or Super Sunday. In 2013, a Brazilian billionaire named Chiquinho Scarpa announced that he would bury his Bentley car so it could accompany him in his afterlife. After being heavily criticized for it, he revealed that it was all part of a campaign to raise awareness about organ donation, saying that people bury things even more valuable than a car, and nobody cares. Emperor Hirohito of Japan is a fan of Mickey Mouse. During a guided visit he made to Disneyland in 1975, he was given a custom Mickey watch, which he later wore for years at multiple official events. A man who got lost in a forest in Saskatchewan, Canada, broke a power pole so that workers would find him when they went to fix it. His plan worked. There is a fantasy novel written in the 2nd century in the Roman Empire that includes a trip to the moon, contact with extraterrestrials, wars between planets, and the discovery of a new continent. It is called A True Story and was written by Lucian of Samosata. Pringles are technically not potato chips, since they contain a mixture of rice, wheat, corn, and partially potatoes, even though the flavor can be very similar to real potato chips. Russia's intelligence agencies still use typewriters for their most confidential documents. They do this so they are not online. This helps them avoid hacking, digital leaks, and any kind of remote cyber espionage. People often shout "Geronimo" when jumping from high places. This comes from a tradition that began when a soldier was testing parachutes in 1940 and wanted to show he was not afraid. So the day before, he promised his fellow soldiers he would shout Geronimo, who was an Apache leader from the 19th century. When they saw that he did shout it, they did not want to be left behind, and everyone started shouting it as well. And that is how it stuck. In the state of Pennsylvania in the United States, alcohol still has an 18% tax to pay for the damages caused by a flood in 1936. French bread has existed longer than the country of France itself. Similar breads were already being made in the region during the Roman era, centuries before France existed as a modern nation. Music is found in every human culture around the world, without exception. Other universal phenomena include personal names and proverbs or traditional sayings. All cultures have them. In 2007, a man named Jeremy Harper decided to count to 1 million. He streamed it live and did not leave his house or shave until he finished. It took him 3 months. Google's artificial intelligence AlphaZero, using a machine learning method, only needed 4 hours to learn how to play chess and defeat the best chess engine programmed by a human. In a study done on runners, it was concluded that those who stretched before every race and those who never stretched had the same likelihood of injury. Only those who stretched occasionally had a much higher likelihood of becoming injured. The aroma of coffee reduces stress and damage caused by lack of sleep, mainly because people associate it with the feeling of having a cup of coffee in the morning and feeling good due to caffeine intake. Yoda species and home planet are never mentioned in any Star Wars movie, book, or comic. Officially, it is an unknown species. Even George Lucas himself decided to keep that mystery to make him more enigmatic. Michael Maniaci is an opera singer whose larynx did not change from childhood for natural reasons. Because of this, he can reach very high soprano notes without using falsetto, unlike most countertenors. North Korea is the happiest country in the world after China. This according to a study conducted by researchers from North Korea. If you make a scale model of the solar system in which the Earth is the size of a marble, you would need approximately 6.8 miles to place all the planets and the sun at their correct distances. The longest prison sentence requested was 384,912 years for a 22-year-old mail carrier in Spain who was accused of not delivering more than 42,000 letters. In the end, the sentence was only 14 years. Salvador Dali made a painting for prisoners in a New York prison that remained in the dining hall for 15 years. Later, they moved it to the prison lobby because, according to them, it would be safer there. But unfortunately, it was stolen in 2003 by employees of the facility. There are only 3 countries that do not offer paid maternity leave: Suriname, Papua New Guinea, and the United States. The oxygen masks on airplanes are not connected to oxygen tanks as we might think. Instead, they use a chemical reaction with different elements that produces oxygen for several minutes. The most decorated soldier of the United States in the First World War was an undocumented Mexican named Marcelino Serna. It is impossible for an ant to be harmed by falling from any height. Its maximum speed is not enough to break its exoskeleton. In addition, its weight is so small that air resistance reduces the impact. In a study conducted on 10,000 pugs, it was concluded that their genetic diversity came from only 50 different individuals. Since its birth, the Sun has completed about 20 orbits around the Milky Way. This distance is so vast that it has barely moved since humans have existed. The last time it was in the exact same position in the universe, the planet was inhabited by dinosaurs. Approximately 40% of all the food produced in the world is wasted. Much of it is wasted even before reaching store shelves. In 1997, 3 men from Yemen attempted to sue NASA for invading Mars. They claimed it belonged to them because it had been inherited from their ancestors 3,000 years ago, based on mythological writings. The lawsuit did not proceed. Leonard Nimoy only appeared in public as Spock once. He needed help from the police to leave the place because there were thousands of fans trying to get his autograph. Students in Japan are required to learn 2,136 kanji. These characters are the minimum needed to fully understand the textbooks used to write the Japanese language. If a 99-year-old person sleeps an average of 8 hours each night, they will have slept for approximately 33 years of their life. The bubbles in a bubble bath act as an insulating layer that helps keep the water hot for much longer. They work by trapping air and reducing heat loss to the environment. Laughter yoga is a therapy method used to reduce stress and anxiety that involves gathering a group of people and laughing voluntarily for no reason. It has been proven that laughter helps with these conditions. There are 3 trillion trees in the world. That is more than the stars that exist in the entire Milky Way. The highest concentration is in tropical regions and boreal forests of the northern hemisphere. The maximum prison sentence in Norway is 21 years. This was established after the death penalty was banned in 1971. Pugs are the least aggressive dog breed of all. A pug will never bite you, or at least it will be very unlikely. Labradors, basset hounds, and boxers are also among the friendliest. In the Second World War, the British captured Germans and placed them in a mansion with microphones where they were served luxurious food and wine. This allowed them to collect valuable information from the casual conversations the prisoners had. This helped end the war. The movie Rango was filmed entirely with real people acting it out like a normal movie before being made digital. This was done to better capture the actor's body language and make everything feel more natural. A pilot not trained to fly using gyroscopic instruments can enter a fatal spiral without even realizing that he is turning. In 2001, the 4th most visited website on the entire internet was Neopets, a virtual pet web game. It ranked 8 places higher than Google. On average, we spend 3 months of our lives sitting on the toilet. This number has increased significantly in recent years due to the rise of smartphones and social media. A wolf's bite is twice as strong as the bite of a German Shepherd dog. It can exceed 1,500 pounds per square inch, which allows them to break large bones easily. A newspaper in Poland held a contest in 1954 for people to name a street. Thanks to this, there is now a street called Winnie Pooh in the center of the capital city, Warsaw. Hitler planned to rebuild Berlin after the war as a neo-Roman city. The main building for events was going to be so large that it could actually rain inside due to the combined breath of 150,000 people. According to a study, people who are bothered by the sound of someone chewing with their mouth open or similar annoying sounds tend to be more creative since they cannot filter irrelevant information from their senses. This helps integrate ideas that are outside the focus of their attention. Roger Bacon was a Franciscan friar from the 13th century who made many important discoveries. In one of his books, he predicted things that were invented centuries later, such as automobiles and submarines. Somali pirates have an investment system similar to the stock market, where you can invest in a group of pirates who, after a successful raid, will pay you part of the profits. The loudest insects in the world are cicadas. They can reach up to 100 decibels, as loud as a vacuum cleaner or a power saw. When capuchin monkeys greet each other, they do so by putting their finger into the other's nose. This helps them form stronger bonds. This social behavior strengthens trust and reduces tension within the group. Scarlet macaws, these colorful animals, can live up to 80 years. In captivity, they can live longer thanks to medical care, good nutrition, and the absence of natural predators. The American football season of 1905 was so dangerous that 18 players died. The President of the United States at that time, Teddy Roosevelt, had to form a committee so that forward passes would be legalized. Singer Ariana Grande got a tattoo in Japanese on the palm of her hand in honor of her song 7 Rings. But due to a writing error, the tattoo actually said "shichirin," which is a type of charcoal grill. She corrected it shortly afterward. Mattel tried to sue the musical group Aqua over their song Barbie Girl, but the lawsuit did not succeed, and the judge literally told them to calm down. The judge wrote, "The parties should chill," which made the case famous. The New York Yankees baseball team has won more World Series championships than the next 4 most successful teams combined. 1 kilogram of popcorn bought at a movie theater costs more than 1 kilogram of the highest quality steak. This is because theaters earn a large portion of their profits by selling food. In a study conducted with 200,000 ostriches over a period of 80 years, it was confirmed that none of them stuck their heads in the sand or dirt when they were frightened. They did not even try. Cartoons have been lying to us. Joaquin Phoenix, the actor who plays the Joker in the movie of the same name, had already been offered roles in movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, specifically Hulk and Doctor Strange, but he rejected the offers because he would have had to sign contracts for many sequels. Americans consume approximately 3,700,000 pounds of sugar contained in Coca-Cola each year. This figure is based on the enormous volume of soda sold in the country and on the fact that a single can contain around 1 4/10 ounces of sugar, mainly in the form of high fructose corn syrup. Skunks that no longer have scent glands can be excellent pets. Similar to ferrets, they are very docile, can learn tricks, and respond when called by their name. The famous spiked collar that dogs wear, which is now used only as fashion, was invented by the Greeks centuries ago to protect them from wolf attacks. Penguins spend approximately 75% of their lives in the water. They are expert swimmers and use their wings as flippers to move with great speed and efficiency. In 1981, India launched its first communication satellite. To transport it, they used a cart pulled by an ox, and the rocket parts were carried by bicycle to the launch site, where the launch was successfully carried out. Converse sneakers were made in the United States until 2001, when the company declared bankruptcy, and in 2003, Nike bought them. From that year on, production was moved to countries in Asia. Kenyan javelin thrower Julius Yego, who won the silver medal at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, learned the javelin technique by watching YouTube videos when he could not find a professional coach. Of all the apes that have been trained to communicate using sign language or other methods, none of them has ever managed to ask a question. This is said to be the main cognitive difference that separates them from humans. In Japan, there is a service that rents average-aged Japanese men, where you can rent one if you feel lonely, for only $10 an hour. The famous billionaire shareholder of Coca-Cola and other companies, Warren Buffett, has only sent one email in his entire life. He sent it to a Microsoft executive, and he also does not like using smartphones. He uses one of those old phones. The company Capcom developed a video game in 1990 based on the California Raisins advertising campaign to encourage people to consume more raisins. However, its release was canceled because raisin sales dropped significantly. A man asked Samsung for a cell phone in exchange for a drawing of a dragon that he made. Samsung sent him a special phone with his dragon printed on the case. In real life, velociraptors were not like in the movies. They had feathers and were only slightly larger than a chicken. The YouTuber Jimmy Donaldson, known as Mr. Beast, who recently reached 100 million subscribers, purchased a studio of approximately 59,200 square feet in North Carolina, dedicated exclusively to making videos, which even includes an apartment where he lives. In the event of a nuclear explosion, it is not recommended to use conditioner because it can cause radioactive material to stick to your hair. Carbonated drinks like Coca-Cola are prohibited in space, but not because they explode in zero gravity or anything like that. In reality, bubbling does not even occur in that environment. It remains like a normal liquid. They are prohibited because they are harder for astronauts to digest than plain water. Right now, there are more people in the world suffering from obesity than people suffering from hunger. This reflects global changes in diet and unequal access to healthy food. The team that makes The Simpsons sent flowers to the studios where South Park is made when they parodied the series Family Guy in one of their episodes. Before becoming one of the most famous singers, musician Jon Bon Jovi made his recorded debut on a Star Wars Christmas album with the song R2-D2, We Wish You a Merry Christmas. Humans have 5 million scent receptors in our noses, while, for example, a dachshund has 125 million, which is why dogs have a much better sense of smell than humans. The word yakuza, used to refer to Japanese gangsters, comes from the numbers 8, 9, and 3, ya-ku-za, which is the worst possible combination in the Oicho Kabu card game. Onomatopoeia is the frustration felt when it is not possible to find an appropriate word for what you want to say, or when you cannot remember it. Dogs can develop a smell similar to popcorn or certain fried foods. This happens when bacteria accumulate on their paws. Scientists believe that multicellular life on planet Earth has only 800 million years remaining. At that point, there will no longer be enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for photosynthesis to occur. The Nenets people in Siberia have survived temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 1,000 years. They depend completely on their reindeer herds, which they use for food, clothing, tools, and transportation. On average, 4-year-old children ask around 400 questions each day. This is a natural part of their cognitive development and learning about the world around them. British tanks are required by design specifications to include a special station for making tea. More than 1 billion women live in countries where domestic violence is not considered a crime. The country of Saudi Arabia has already used almost all the water within its territory, after decades of using it for agriculture in the desert. Within a few years, it will have to import all of its food because it will no longer be able to produce it. The cost of solar energy has dropped extraordinarily since the 1970s. In 1975, the price of solar panels was around $100 per watt. By 2026, the average price of solar modules on the international wholesale market is approximately between 15 and 20 cents per watt, depending on the country and the purchase volume. According to calculations by scientists, the first planet that formed in our solar system was Neptune. It is believed that it formed farther from the Sun and later migrated to its current position. In medieval England, there was a game similar to soccer that was very popular, except that hundreds of people participated, running wildly to reach the ball. It was even banned due to the problems it caused. The continents separated long ago at the same speed that fingernails grow. That is, very slow, but fast at the same time. According to a study, hugging someone for approximately 20 seconds or more releases oxytocin, a hormone that reduces stress, blood pressure, and the risk of heart disease. Thomas Edison's last breath is trapped in a test tube in a museum in Michigan, United States. For every human on the planet, there are 1.6 million ants. In total, their combined biomass is comparable to that of all humans together. There is a wife-carrying competition in Finland. The winner receives a prize equal to the weight of his wife in beer.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.